The Zero is Flash Gordon's 7th and final kill of World War II. He and his fellow pilots escape the last enemy flak bursts and head for home. But though the battle with the Japanese task force might be over, the struggle to survive the flight back to Enterprise has just begun. As the last rays of light disappear over the horizon, the Enterprise pilots and air crews continue their long trek home. Ramage and his fellow dive bombers will have to carefully conserve their fuel supply.
It was very quiet. About halfway back then, I told Cawley, I think we're going to make it.
But for some American pilots, their luck has run out. Many are battle damaged, and the heavy Avengers are already running out of gas. There's no telling if any of the flyers will ever see Enterprise or the American fleet again. In the confusion, groups of planes scatter, heading off in different directions into the unknown. The situation seems hopeless. Over the radio, Enterprise pilots can hear the painful distress calls of their fellow airmen, followed by the sickening sound of aircraft hitting the water. Patches of green phosphorescence, the dye markers for aviators in distress, dot the blackness of the Pacific, marking the spot where the journey has ended for some Navy pilots. The painful odyssey goes on for 2 hours. It's absolute desolation, a dark sea that stretches endlessly in every direction. But then, just as all hope seems lost, Grim Reaper Flash Gordon sees the impossible. The destroyer escorts of the U.S. fleet. One by one, the little gunships turn on their bright searchlights, marking the way back for their fellow sailors in the sky.
And then some destroyers had been sent out to meet us, and their searchlights were up, and
Home is that way. I'll never forget.
Back on Enterprise, her sailors and Marines can only wait and watch the dark skies for their warplanes and pilots.
Our pilots had limited fuel left, and of course everybody was pulling for the guys to make it home.
At 8:45 p.m. The first warplanes arrive over the American task force. It's simply chaos. Most are flying on fumes, and even worse, distant lightning has confused some pilots, and now they're headed off in the wrong direction. Mitcher could have a catastrophe on his hands. So, ignoring standard naval procedures, he utters one of the most famous commands in the Pacific War: turn on the lights. The entire fleet illuminates in a shower of search beams and running lights aboard the carrier decks. Even escort vessels fire off star shells to light up the skies. But the guiding lights are a mixed blessing for many of the pilots.
Sounds real good to light up all the ships, but it was very difficult because you couldn't tell the carriers from the destroyers and cruisers and so forth.
Night carrier operations are a new strategy, and most of the young pilots have never made a landing in the dark. Many of them make rough water landings. The air is filled with crunching sounds of steel and salt water.
there was a fiasco down there. No one was getting aboard, and some did. They had an accident.
From their battle stations along the flight deck, the Big E's Marines have a dangerous front row seat.
Two of them would try to land at the same time, and they'd go respective ways. One go clockwise, and one go counterclockwise.
Within minutes, Enterprise's flight deck looks like a parking lot. Jig Dog Ramage and his fellow bomber pilots scatter across the fleet, landing on any friendly deck they can find. In the skies overhead, Flash Gordon and his fellow Reapers orbit over the task force, searching for a place to land. But now, they're also running on fumes.
A little after 10, my number 4 man said his red light was on. So we got down the landing pattern, and When I came around, the deck was foul. I landed aboard the Lexington. Well, it was 10:20. It had been in the air 6 hours.
10:20 p.m. The last of 23 planes that make it aboard Enterprise touches down on her flight deck. Most of them are from other carriers. In the confusion, the air groups have been completely jumbled up. But, miraculously, the Big E only has one pilot missing in the desperate night carrier landings. Killer Kane. Everyone else has either made it aboard a friendly ship or has been rescued. The last-ditch assault on the Japanese task force and the frantic night recovery has cost the U.S. fleet 99 warplanes. But thankfully, the human toll is much less. Only 49 pilots and air crewmen and 6 flight deck sailors have been lost in the chaotic battle. For the next 2 days, destroyer escorts crisscross the sea searching for Killer Kane. For some of these ships, the reward for a salvage flyer is an extra ration of ice cream for the crew. On the afternoon of the 22nd, a destroyer approaches the Enterprise, flashing its signal lights. Suddenly, the hearts of everyone aboard are lifted. The question from the destroyer: how much ice cream is Killer Kane worth?
Since he was a commander, they wanted 25 gallons of ice cream for commander, group commander. They wanted extra rations of ice cream. They got it.
A few tubs of ice cream are a small price to pay for the veteran aviator. The Battle of the Philippine Sea is a disaster for the Japanese Navy. Admiral Ozawa has failed to drive the U.S. fleet from Saipan, and the defeat has cost him hundreds of Imperial pilots and 3 aircraft carriers: Iyo, Taiho, and Shokaku.
Some of the best news we got there was to hear that our old nemesis, the Shokaku, had been put down.
For the Japanese, the aftermath of the battle is a recognition that their carrier force is finished. They may still have vessels, but they no longer have aircraft or pilots to put aboard those vessels.
But the Japanese fleet is not finished yet. The Big E's nemesis, Zuikaku, is still afloat, and so are the battleships. Massive battle wagons, Musashi and Yamato, along with an armada of cruisers and destroyers, are ready to meet the Enterprise in battle. The bloody combat on Saipan goes on for another 3 weeks. It becomes one of the most costly battles of the entire Pacific War. More than 16,000 U.S. Marines and soldiers are killed or wounded taking the island. 24,000 Japanese soldiers perish in the battle. Even worse, some 5,000 Japanese soldiers and civilians, men, women, and children, commit suicide rather than surrender to U.S. forces. For the Americans, these nightmarish scenes only foreshadow the horrors to come. As Enterprise moves closer to the Philippine Islands and the Imperial homeland, she faces an ominous future. Soon on Battle 360, it's the greatest sea battle of all time, and one of the deadliest. American General Douglas MacArthur has vowed to return to the Philippines, and Enterprise is going to help get him there. In the epic battle of Leyte Gulf, the Japanese Navy makes an apocalyptic last stand.